Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the March. Is it March? Oh, yeah. Today is March 1st. Isn't that crazy how this is already here? Fat Tuesday. Got my guest is a Louisiana boy, so got a shout out for Fat Tuesday. But March 2022 live webinar. Tonight's gonna be so much fun. I have one of my best friends, Marcus Briggs, with us today. And so he's going to be sharing with us in just a moment. But while you're logging on, I want to just say good job. You guys have done an incredible job just making this semester roll on smoothly. You're doing your assignments on time. You're interacting in the discussion forums. I'm just so proud of you and what all you're learning. I've been hanging out in the classroom a good bit the last couple of days, and I'm just so impressed with with the quality of work that you guys are doing. So I'm just grateful for you all. So tonight is a special by Pastor Marcus Briggs. So just to remind you a little bit of where we are in the continuum of the internship webinars, we spent some time initially talking about character. So that's a whole semester on character and how God blesses who you are more than what you do. And so we talk about who you need to be in order to be able to lead well. And from character, we go to calling, which is like, okay, now that you're the right kind of person, what are you called to do? Personality, life experience, so on and so forth, spiritual gifts. How do you find your calling? From there, we go to capacity, which is like, now that you know what you're supposed to do, how can you get to be really good at doing whatever that thing is? What skills and competencies do you need in order to excel? And then finally, where we are this semester is all about the church. So how can you serve the church? Because everywhere you serve has different expectations. There's a different culture, a different perspective on leadership. So this semester is all about actually putting into practice. You've got your character right. You found your calling. You've increased in your capacity. Now let's put you to work. And that's kind of where tonight's webinar will eventually lead us. But before we dive into the content, Pastor Marcus, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about River Park Church, how long you've been in ministry, how Russia and the vaccine kind of mingle to usher in the end times. Whatever you want to do, just go for it.
I'm going to just bypass that last question there. Man, first of all, it's an honor to be here, Landon. Always fun to be able to hang out with you, man, and to everybody else that's kind of online right now. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. It truly is an honor. I always love being able to speak into the lives of people that are wanting to give their lives towards ministry and further their education in that. That's fantastic. My name is Marcus Briggs. I've been serving here at River Park since we launched. I was in college when we launched this church and became the lead pastor here in 2021. So we transitioned for, I think, 6.5 years. So we slowly turned that boat into this, man. But been in ministry all my life. I'm a fourth generation pastor on one side of my family, a fifth generation on the other side. So I didn't even have weird uncles. They were even in ministry. So that's all I've known, man.
So River Park, every church says, well, we're different than other churches. We're not, but River Park is a really different church. So tell us a little bit about the vibe, even the building, the space of River Park, what it's like.
Yeah, so we like to say we're a church that's in the Bible, but out of the box. And that happens to be literally as well as, I guess, figuratively. But we're in an abandoned theme park. So matter of fact, I went outside a little bit earlier before this webinar started, and we bought a carousel about 1.5 years ago. That's going to be right there as an anchor piece right when you come through the front gates past the ticket booths of our park. We've been restoring it for the past year, and I noticed that they started putting it up today. So it's supposed to be, their deadline was Easter this year, and so it looks like it's going to be up before then. So
that's awesome, man. Well, great church, come from a great legacy, and I'm glad that you joined us tonight. So what I want to do is, before we get started with the content you have prepared for us this evening, which is going to be fantastic, just to let people know a little bit more about you, And is in the second semester, we have this assignment where we have our students go and interview a pastor or a ministry leader and ask them a series of questions. So I'm going to do that with you. I'm not going to ask you all the questions, but kind of rapid fire and just put you on the spot a little bit. But that way we kind of get to know you, and you get to tell us some things that can help all of us. So Pastor Marcus, if you were starting over again, what would you do differently and why?
Man, I would have surrounded myself with a group of 3 to 5 dudes that I could tell everything to, and that they wouldn't care, even if it just totally shocked them.
Right. Yeah. So
And
you're
the
past.
reason, yeah, and the reason is because I think that there's a lot of things that you deal with in ministry that you don't know who you can share it with. And you're like, man, I'm struggling with this right now. And everybody I'm leading, I can't share it with any of them. And I can't really share this. So I think you've got to have a friend, and they've got to be good for you, not just someone that's going to basically allow you to lie in your self-pity. They're going to be come on, man, you got this, and pick you up and be
Right.
there for you. So
Yeah. Because you're a pastor's kid, so you kind of raised in this, and then slowly you become the lead guy. And what's easy to happen is that you don't feel like you need those relationships initially because you're not really the guy.
right.
And then because you don't have them, once you become the guy, it's harder
Yep.
to go get them. So you're saying
Yep.
from the beginning you would have identified those key relationships and invested in them from the
Yep.
beginning.
Yeah, and personally, I think that probably the best thing is that if they're not in your immediate sphere of influence, it'd be good too. I mean, like, your relationship is so strong because partially we can share what we're going through, and we're not in the same town. So you can even tell me about people that you don't like around you and stuff
Right.
like that. And I'm like, I ain't gonna run into that guy at all, So
Yeah.
not gonna, and there's the same thing back and forth. So I think that that's valuable. Plus, you're in a similar role as I am, so there's a what I'm going through. I don't have to explain it, or something like that. And I think a lot of people want to rely on the person that's in the trench with them, and not necessarily the person that's in the same position as.
Right. Okay, good. So if you were going to start, same question, but a little different nuance. Starting over again, what would you do the same?
So I think what I would do the same is I pretty much have served in every single role that there is to serve in at church at one point or another. And I think, as bad as I hated it at the time, some of them at the time, I think I would do that all over again. It has given me a perspective of being able to lead those areas with great intent and great perspective. It's giving me great wisdom. I think on that only experience can bring, and by being in those roles, been able to sharpen some ideas.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about the vibe at River Park is because you can be preaching on Sunday and you're behind a tractor, behind the wheel of a
Yeah,
tractor on Monday. And
that's right.
so I
That's
remember
right.
we have a mutual friend who's on staff at River Park, Jeremy, who's a good friend of both of ours. And I remember when he was coming to River Park, that's one thing he talked about was like, I love the Briggs, I love River Park. I just don't know that I want to drive a tractor in the season of my life. Because that's sort of how you guys roll is like
Yeah.
both you and your dad have been willing to do anything, everything, nothing. And that's what makes you the great leaders that you are. Give us a book recommendation: spiritual growth, leadership, church teams. Like if you got 110 students watching tonight, if you could have them read any book, what would that book be?
So I can't do a one, dude.
Okay.
I anticipated this question, and I gotta give you more than one. Spiritual growth, man. I would say The Normal Christian Life by Watchman Nee,
So good. Yeah.
or Mere Christianity. If you've not read Mere Christianity, you got to read that book. Fantastic book. I read it every year. I think from a leadership standpoint, I would say Start with Why by Simon Sinek is fantastic, but probably the one that been drilled into me all my life is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then probably one of the best all around books that I've ever read as far as helping me in leadership is Lead Like Jesus by Ken Blanchard. I love that book.
Very good. Those are all great books. Great books. So in following Christ in general, or in ministry in particular, what keeps people from finishing well? So lately we've seen in all kinds of circles, whether it's non-denominational or broader evangelical circles, of guys and gals not finishing well, either deconstructing their faith or having some kind of moral failure. What is it that keeps people from being able to finish as strong as they started?
Man, I think it's probably wider than just a single thing, but the two that jump out at me, number one is not having a healthy rhythm of life.
Yeah.
I think they need a rhythm of rest and a rhythm of work and rest and a rhythm of confession and a rhythm of, conquering but having those healthy rhythms are very, very important. And then the second thing I would say is what I alluded to earlier that I would have done differently from the start. And that is, you got to have a group of friends that you can confess to and say, man, life sucks right now, or man, celebrate with me. We're winning,
Right.
But you got to have that.
Yeah, man. And I want to get into the content you have because it's going to be so great, but I felt just compelled to say this. Is like, there's this upline, sideline, and downline that we talk a lot about. And with your upline, they're a mentor. There's someone that you can be honest with to a large extent. But often that upline is either your boss or like there's some kind of like financial, like you get fired, like, so there's always gonna be at this level of like, can I really say this to them? And I would really encourage you to go find a mentor that you could say whatever you want to say, and they're not going to hold it against you. But what I found is just that beauty of what you're talking about are the sidelines of guys who are on the journey with you, that they can't fire you. They can't, even if they were to think less of you, it's not going to ultimately, impact your ability to take care of your family or whatever. So having those people that you can be really raw and honest with. And so you brought that up a couple of times. I think that's really, really important. Just having those relationships and the rhythms that you've discussed.
Yeah,
So,
and the even the rhythm is found in how you handle those relationships, because a friend's not a friend if there's no consistency there, because there's no trust. Trust is only built in consistency. If you only talk to somebody once a year and you say that they're your accountability partner,
right.
First of all, not only is that not true because it's only once a year, but
Right.
also there's no trust that's going to be built between you to share the deepest, darkest things. So you got to have that relationship that you feel comfortable enough, and that comes only through time and rhythm.
Yeah. And then we all learn from one another, which is one beautiful thing about the body of Christ and about kind of the fraternity of ministry. That's one thing I've learned from you, Marcus, is like, you like, even whenever you don't need something, sometimes you'll call just to say hey and check in. And my person, I'm like, well, that's weird. like you didn't need something, you just call just because you want to, or like, but you've really taught me a lot about that, about just, if you want a relationship to work, there has to be a consistency in that, so that whenever I do have a need or you have a need, we already have that long-standing relationship, that it's not like, well, I know we haven't talked in a year, but oh, by the way, my marriage is falling apart, or I made a huge mistake, or because that becomes really difficult.
Yeah.
So
and I think that we've all had that person that the only time they ever call is when they need something, and you start to like not want to answer that call. And so I just learned, I think what kind of what you're alluding to is funny. I had to learn that like, man, I really want to feel like I'm bringing value to relationships and not just taking value from relationships. I mean, that's the true koinonia, a New Testament term there that we need to experience as the church, is that it's a give and receive. There's both sides to that relationship.
Right. Beautiful. All right, let's move on here. Here's a big one that it's probably honestly the area that I feel weakest in leadership and ministry. And that is managing conflict, because I mean, that's a part of what we do, is is managing conflict. So what is one thing that you've learned that's helped you manage conflict well? Because if you haven't experienced this yet as students, if you're in leadership at any level, conflict is absolutely going to come.
Man, again, it's hard to narrow it down to one thing. But I think I would say probably the biggest thing is I used to think conflict was a bad thing, and now I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think it's a necessary thing for growth. In fact, there are diamonds are built under conflict, under pressure.
Right.
And so like I read a book and I forget what, I wish I could give credit to the right author here. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but this guy said, you need to learn to mine for conflict. Because it's on the other side of good, healthy conflict that you see actually the right things are formed. And so I just changed my attitude to how I felt about conflict. Conflict is an opportunity for a better idea to emerge, not what we've traditionally looked at it as is like, oh, they don't like me. And I think we get caught up into how people feel about us as opposed to the overall idea is, oh, I'm secure. They love me. I love them. All right, we got that out of the way. Now let's talk about the conflict,
Right. So good. What do you do to keep your personal walk with the Lord vibrant?
Man, I think I am I have a consistency of doing, like I read the Bible every year. I've done that for the past like 6 or 7 years and had a way, but I change the way I read through the Bible every year. So like one year I may read the canon. Next year I may read it in chronological order. Next year I may read a Psalm, proverb a day, and maybe hit a Old Testament, New Testament. But I read through the Bible every year. But I think those changes, just like if I treat it like a dating relationship. My wife would not want to go out on the same restaurant every single time we went on a date. She'd want to change it up a little bit. And I think I try to do that with my walk with the Lord. Is I don't say, all right, today I have to do these 5 things. I say, all right, today I just feel like worshiping Jesus. I'm gonna worship Jesus today. That's gonna be my time with him. Tomorrow I'm gonna do it this way. Change. I think keep changing it as a relationship. That's the way you'd want it if you were in that relationship.
Yeah. Hey, so real quickly then, so you're a busy guy, you're pastoring, you have a beautiful family, growing family. And so what is your morning routine like? How do you make sure that you start your day well? What does that look like for you?
So funny you asked that question. Had to do an inventory because a lot of times what we say we value, if we go and look at our time spent, what we think we value is not actually what we're proving that we value.
Right.
And so I actually did an inventory of that here not too long ago and kind of realized this about a year and a half ago. And what I said I valued, I wasn't valuing. And
Right.
so I value my time with the Lord. So I have to wake up before we get the kids ready for school. I value my wife, and my wife's love language is acts of service. So if I just let her take care of getting the kids ready for school, that's not good. It's not smart. So I am a part of our morning routine there. So if I want a long time with Jesus, it has to be before the chaos begins in the morning. And I make breakfast every morning for all the kids. That's my role. So I get up early enough to kind of have my one-on-one time with Jesus. It's not going to be the only time that I meet with Jesus. I'm going to have multiple times throughout the day that I try. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, I spend an hour with God in the morning. I can't do that. My kids wake up at the crack of dawn and can't do that time frame. So I have to kind of break up my moments throughout my day and things like that. So I wake up, I spend a little bit of time in the Word, drinking my coffee. Then first kid's up and I'm making breakfast. And the next 2 are up and wrapping up breakfast at that point. And then while they're kind of getting ready to rest, I go work out. And then after I get through with my workout, typically come back in, taking one of them to school. And then I go to the office after that, and my wife takes the other 2 to school. So it's just right now, next year, that'll be a totally different routine because one of them will be moving to another school at that point. So
Right.
it's just trying to break up that time and the values that I said, oh, value the Lord, I value my family, value my physical health. I was skipping like 2 out of the 3 to get to
Right.
the office early. And like, it was weird. It wasn't in good alignment.
Yeah. Okay. And why I asked that is because I think we're all, me included, busy, got a lot going on. And so we're just always trying to find ways to like, okay, you can do what you value. It just takes some sacrifice and some intentionality. And so, cool. All right, man. Well, that's, you feel good and warmed up now?
Hey, man, whatever you need from me, man.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
We're warmed up and ready for the conversation of that we came here for. So you're going to show us a little bit about how to lead people in whatever context they're in. Obviously, our students, there are some that are like at an executive level of church leadership. There are others that are watching who are serving on a team, but really may struggle with even being called a leader. But whatever sphere of influence you have, there's a way to lead. So what I've brought you here to do is to show that like you can be really smart. You can have your spiritual disciplines. You can get your hour in every morning and an hour in at noon, an hour in at night, and all of that stuff. But if you don't have the basic skills to lead people, then the effectiveness of your service in the local church will always be limited. And so since this semester is all about how do I lead in the local church, I wanted to bring you in to have this conversation on like, okay, now how do I actually make a difference with those that God has entrusted to me?
Yeah. And I think, man, part of the things that you said right there kind of helped me understand a little bit more clearly what I need to be sharing about, because you said leading in the local church context. And so we need to understand kind of what the local church context is. And so I asked Landon if I could share this little drawing thing with you guys. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we hope this works. We tried it a while ago and it did, so we'll see. Everybody can see my whiteboard, hopefully.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yes, we got it.
Yes. All right. So I think that there's a familiar, it's stunning. That is a great comment right there. Thank you for that. I spent a lot of time on this whiteboard. There is a true misunderstanding, I should say, in church culture that keeps us from being able to lead people the right way. Most people tend to lead people the way that they want to be led, instead of leading them the way that they need to be leading someone the way that that person needs to be led. For example, I mentioned my wife's love language. Well, my love language is not acts of service. So if I lead her or try to care for her the way that I want to be cared for, a lot of times it doesn't work out as good as if I do it her way. So I wanted to share this because we have to understand where people are coming from. And I wanted to I'm gonna draw this out. It's have you ever heard of an Eisenhower matrix? It is basically, you see two different lines. You see where people are kind of standing there, two different axes, and each one measures different things. So if we take this middle one right here and we call it challenge, and we take this one right here and we call it invitation, you see that there is a direct correlation to invitation and challenge. When Jesus would invite the disciples, we saw both exist. Every time he leads the disciples, we see both existing in this. And this idea that Jesus says, come and follow me, but he says there's a qualifier there. It's not just come follow me, that's high invitation. But there's also a high challenge. Take up your cross and follow me. So Jesus is both. He's both high invitation. You get to be with Jesus, but he's also high challenge. There's a cross that you're going to have to bear to do this. So yeah, this is an empowering zone. And Landon, you're about to say something there? What?
No, I was just that's so good, because Jesus was both high invitation and high challenge. And I grew up in a religious environment that was, and I think you're going to be getting here, that was all challenge and no invitation.
That's exactly right.
I feel like even in the way that we do things now, sometimes it feels like all invitation and no challenge. So it's like, they come to Jesus and they're like, hey, I want to follow you. And he's like, yeah, sure. Just sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and then come follow me. So there was always this element of challenge that correlate with it. So like, I'm all in. I'm excited where you're going here.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Jesus, and I'm going to write this here because it's the Jesus zone. This quadrant is this Jesus zone where we see that what Jesus is doing in us is saying, hey, I want you to be all in. Come follow me. This is high invitational, but it's also, there's a cost. There's something that's going to cost you to do this. This is truly the calling of ministry. Every one of you have felt this calling, and we love to make it I'm going to say it like this. There's this sexy terminology of it, like calling. Oh, do you feel called to the ministry? Yeah. Well, hang on, because it's probably going to be a challenge right after that call. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's going to be you feel called to the ministry? Yes, I want to preach. Great. Go stack those chairs. High invitation, high challenge. You know, you get both. Your pastor says I've got great potential and then asks me to vacuum. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's high invitation, high challenge. But as Landon just kind of said, whoops, hang on, guys. As Landon just said, not all cultures are the Jesus way. So we see another thing. There's another side of it where there's low invitation and high challenge. This upper left-hand quadrant here, this is called burnout. If it's an all challenge quadrant, but no invitation, you get burnout real quick. And I'm going to write all these down and we'll kind of talk about them a little bit more. The opposite is true. If you end up in a culture that is low challenge, high invitation, it's pretty cozy. It's pretty easygoing, pretty easy to meet, easy to kind of exist in that culture. And then there's one that is worse than all of them. And it is when it's low invitation and low challenge. This is apathy. It becomes apathetic. I may be spelling that completely wrong. I'm awful at spelling. But we see this apathy that exists in many, many people. So as you said, we've gone from a burnout culture in Christianity, at least as a whole, especially in larger churches and stuff like that. We've gone from a high, serve Jesus, serve Jesus, serve Jesus, serve Jesus, serve Jesus, and we don't have a rhythm of rest. So we created a burnout culture, and we've gone from that. We've gone from this kind of culture here, and we've just kind of swooped into this culture from a Christianity, from a leadership standpoint. But that is not always the answer for what people need. You can't blanket lead people in this. You have to see where they exist at. Because if somebody is cozy, Jesus found the Pharisees and they were pretty cozy in their little world if they know the law. And so Jesus didn't approach them with hardly any invitation. It was all challenge. You say this, but I tell you this, like, it's pretty heavy challenge. What he's trying to move them forward is something else. Then he would look at someone else that was struggling hard and he would say, hey, come here, let me come near to me. It would draw them in closer. He was constantly moving. But if I know that I've got somebody that is cozy, I want to move them into an empowering culture. The problem when I move somebody from empowerment, and I'm going to change colors so we can see this a little differently. If I want to move someone from this cozy culture into an empowering culture, it looks easy. It looks like I can just do this, but that's not the case. Actually, what they're going to do is they're going to swoop a little more into a burnout culture to come back around and do this. Because to anybody that's been cozy and comfortable for a little bit, if I start throwing discomfort at you, it feels like burnout for a second before it feels empowering. And if the same is also true, if I'm moving someone from a burnout culture, I may need to move them into a rhythm of rest before I move them into empowerment. I need to let them do this. But what we see all the time is actually most people live their lives and they move straight from burnout to either go to a cozy culture or an apathetic culture. They either say, I don't want to serve anymore, I'm gonna just sit here on this pew, or I just don't care anymore, I may not even go to church. And people that go from cozy, they lose the sight of the why of why we even go to church, and they tend to retreat into apathy as well. And so if we don't, as leaders, understand where this person is coming from, we could lead them down the wrong way. We could actually be asking them, challenging them beyond, like, I got somebody that's dealing with burnout and I'm like, man, they just need to go better, harder, stronger, longer. And it's like, no, they need to get a rhythm of rest in their life. They need to step down into that. I need to give them high invitation. Here's a good example of it to understand it. My daughter was struggling with something in school, and we tried a million things to try and get it. And it just so happened that the week that we found out about this, we had already challenged her on about 4 other things that she was dealing with. And I told Chelsea, I said, if we want her to change in this just isn't going to work. And I took my own medicine. We teach this in one of our discipleship classes. And so I said, I took my own message in this and said, I'm going to take her out. And so Camilla and I went out and she likes to rock climb at a rock climbing gym there in town. So we went rock climbing that night. And then after we left the rock climbing, so I led with invitation, high invitation. Let's go rock climbing. And that's all we did for about 2 hours. When we got in the truck, I said, "Hey, can you do something for me?" And she said, "What, Daddy?" And I said, "I need you to work on this at school." I said, "Do you think you can do that?" She said, "Yeah, I can do that, Daddy." Let me tell you what, if it weren't for the invitation, it would have never come out like that at all. It was the high invitation that allowed me to be high challenge. What I've learned about Jesus is his invitation of love always precedes his challenge, but challenge will be right behind it. He's always done that. If you feel like Jesus is leading you with challenge, it's probably because you're sitting in a cozy culture. If you feel like Jesus is leading you in a way that seems like, man, this is conflicting with my comfort zone, he probably is. He probably sees you in this cozy moment and saying, there's something more you got to do. But if you feel like you're burnt out, it doesn't mean that you're going to go straight to an empowering culture, but you need to raise the invitation. So as leaders, if I'm dealing with a burnout person, I have to invite them into my life. Hey, let's just hang out. Let's go. Let's not talk about stuff like this. Let's just go out for a little bit. Let's go do something. Hang out. Let's have coffee. Let's do this thing. If I'm dealing with a cozy person, I'm just trying to move them into a place of, hey, man, I need you to try and do this. I'm going to give you responsibility. Because a lot of people, they're given a task, but they're not given responsibility, and it leads them to be cozy. And they just get comfortable in a moment. And there's a difference between a task and a responsibility. Let's talk for another night. And then the apathy leads into this. I'm just trying to get them to care about anything. It's the one true one that can actually move directly into empowerment with balance, because you can take somebody and give them invitation along with challenge as you grow them.
So good. And so I think too, well, let's just say you're a kids ministry director. So there's these 4 ways of motivating and leading people. Normally it's burnout, right? You get the same few volunteers, and because they've said yes, how many times have we seen this happen? They end up serving every Sunday, and even the Sundays they're not supposed to serve, someone else doesn't show up, and so they have to serve. So what ends up happening is burnout. And sometimes our response to that, and wouldn't you agree that's kind of the common thing in kids ministry is burnout?
Sure.
So our response to that then is usually making it to leading them to apathy or to coziness. So it's like, well, you know what? You don't have to serve. If everyone would sign up, if we could recruit enough volunteers, you could only have to serve once a quarter, which is like, this is the most important thing you could be doing, but you only have to do it once every 3 months.
Yeah.
It's like the most important thing you do to like show your wife that you love her is to serve her. But don't worry, Marcus, you only have to do it once every 3 months. That's usually what we do is to avoid the burnout. We make things too cozy, which still kind of leads them to apathy. It's like, well, why do I even serve at all? Like, if it's not important enough for me to do regularly, then why is it important at all? So I think what you're leading us to is this example of trying to move people to empower them, rather than, if they're burnt out, don't make them cozy, but empower them. If they're too cozy, don't burn them out, empower them.
That's right. Yeah, and so like the natural tendency, as you're saying, is to lower challenge instead of raising invitation. And I always looked at it like this. I actually just talked to some people about this the other day, is that there's this idea that I'm an LSU fan. I mean, Louisiana, of course, everybody is. So being an LSU fan, I love the Tigers. And I go crazy on the field and cheering them on and stuff like that. And I told somebody the other day that, you want to know the biggest act of worship in our country, go watch a football game in LSU Stadium, Death Valley, that's worship. And I told somebody, I said, I don't lower my level of excitement for the Tigers. I just raise my level of excitement for the church and for Jesus, and give more to him than I give for them. I didn't have to lower what I do for them to make what I'm doing for Jesus right. I just raised what I'm doing for Jesus. It's the same thing. We don't necessarily have to lower the challenge for somebody to feel empowered, but I do have to raise the invitation So in other words, it can't all be show up and do this, show up and do this, show up and do this. What I need to also add is, hey, let's just get together for a little bit. Hey, we're going to get some coffee. We're going to do some team building tonight. There's going to be some more invitation that exists on that team than just burnout. And the thing in leadership, though, is rarely is your entire team experiencing the same quadrant at the same time.
Well,
If you lead your entire team all the same way, you're going to confuse some people in a little bit. Wait, why are we backing off right now? Why are we engaging in more of this right now? So it becomes a little more individualistic in many cases than just the entire team.
Right. So good. So on this this matrix, so we look and we got some questions starting to roll in, but I've got a couple for you.
Yeah, I can pull it back up if you need me to, man.
I think, I think we're good there, but how do we, okay, I had an alarm off my computer. That was fun. That does not mean the time's up. So like on this spectrum, I find that that I probably push the coziness a little too often in my leadership style. The challenge may be a little too high on my preaching style. So I'm just kind of curious on how you, when I lead, I'm always like, hey, you know what? It's okay. Just do what you can. We'll make it work. We'll find a way to make it happen. But then preaching, I personally sometimes have a harder time with just raise your hand and everything's going to be okay. We're going to say a prayer and then you go to heaven and peace is going to come down like a tornado into your life and everything's going to be good and wonderful. I'm on, I kind of go towards, so in your own life and ministry, kind of what's this look like for you? Before we get into other questions on how have you, do you normally lead people like from challenge and you need to be reminded that you need to also empower them, or are you more of a cozy type guy? And then, so where are you on that spectrum?
Well, I think that everybody tends to lead from how they want to be led or how they respond. And I'm this, Landon, I'm a competitive guy. So I'm a challenge type person. Naturally, my default leadership style is, well, do better. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know that that's always healthy. So I think that you do have your tendencies and everything. I think that was an interesting observation you said there too, that your leadership style may not match your preaching style. And actually, I don't know that I've ever thought about it that way, but mine is probably different too. But I think you and I are exact opposites. I think my leadership style is probably more challenge than invitation. And my preaching style is probably more invitation than challenge. Not that I'm inviting people into coziness, but I find that I probably dumb it down too much. We deal with a lot of new believers at River Park naturally because of our location. And so I think that probably I tend to do that. But I think everybody has a tendency that you want to lead from. I think a good leader, becoming a great leader, begins to not lead from what we want or how we want to lead, but we lead the person that we're leading. So the reason I'm high invitation right now in my congregation is that's what it needs. There may come a day where I'm leading deep believers and need to get more challenging and more deep theology in this context. But right now, they just need to know that your shame needs to go away. And, the piece of God, like, we're dealing with the same problems every week. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that it has to come from you recognizing, remember, leadership is not just about the leader. It's about, John Maxwell says, if you think you're leading somebody and you look behind you and nobody's following you, you're just taking a walk. So there's two parties in leadership that are involved and engaged in this. And so the understanding the other party is more important, in my opinion, than understanding how I want to lead.
Right. Great. Well, let's get into some questions that are coming up. Unless do you have anything else you want to clarify or?
No, man, I think.
All right.
I think that's Mic drop.
Yeah, this is great. And also we, probably want to go ahead and mention like this rubric is not original, the challenge and
No,
invitation.
no.
But it's a great way, because many of us are not familiar with it, of like kind of putting a lens over church leadership, because I think a lot of our leadership styles, we are either too challenging or too inviting.
That's
And
right.
and I think we see that as a big problem in our churches, that many people, like if we look at the trend of deconstruction in millennials and Gen Z, of people who are kind of like deconstructing their faith, it's because they came from these really challenging environments.
Yeah, that's right.
And their response has been to become so inviting that the Bible loses all of its authority and meaning.
Yeah.
And that we're not really going to get into deconstruction right now, but we're trying to show why this is so relevant for church leaders to have this conversation of how do we create an environment that is the right balance of challenge and invitation. There's a church I follow real closely in Queens. I love the Rich Villodas. He wrote The Deeply Formed Life. Their church does a rule of life, which is kind of like a covenant of how you're going to live, your spiritual disciplines, the decisions you make. So that's part of their membership process, right? So there's this, they feel like a lot of our mega church mentality has been so inviting that they're pulling back to like, let's get some challenge back. Let's begin to challenge again. All that to say that most that are watching this, they don't get the final say on what kind of church they go to. Some of them go to churches that are more challenging in their overall culture, where others go that are more inviting their overall culture. This is more about individually, how do you lead your team? Like whatever sphere of influence you've been given, how do you really empower them and engage them? So that's kind of the rubric we're putting this over, is like, some of us tend to be the more challenging leaders, some tend to be more inviting leaders. And if we're not careful, what our strengths are will actually become weaknesses, because all challenge and no invitation leads to burnout. All invitation and no challenge leads to coziness or apathy. So let's get into some of these questions. When someone feels burnout, how can you effectively and practically raise the invitation level to empower them without sending them to apathy? Like, what are some practical examples of taking someone from burnout to empowerment without making them apathetic?
I think, first of all, it's relationship. So if you understand that this person is burnout because they serve literally all experiences every Sunday, well, first of all, they're out of rhythm. We actually require, like again, I get to set culture with our staff, and I realize most people don't, but like, there is a requirement for missed Sundays. Not like there is a limit, but we require them to miss at least 2 Sundays a year. And depending on their position, if they're in a pastoral role, I require them to miss at least 4 Sundays a year to not be here. And the whole idea is we need them to actually not just breathe the air here, but to breathe somewhere else for a little bit so that they can come into this culture. Well, I think the same is true if you've got somebody that's serving on your team and they never look up all the time. They need a rhythm of, hey, you need a break, and you want to win their friendship forever. Go in and tell them, hey, I need you at your best, so I need you to take a break. And that's unheard of in church culture right now, is, hey, take a break, take a day off. And if we can get to where we do that, so I think that's one way you do it, understanding that rhythm that they're not in and helping them establish that. And the second way, I think, is just it blow your mind the renewed strength that would come to someone if they just hung out with you on a non-serve day. Let's go have coffee. And it blows my mind how much that just like inspires somebody, like, and that's all they needed. And it's shocking, but what that was is that's invitation, and that's all they got from that moment.
Right. Yeah. And I would say normally that burnout does not come from too much work, but not enough significance in the work that you're doing.
That's so good.
So we can use, as humans, we have a pretty large capacity to handle a lot. So usually when we're burnt out, it's not because we're doing too much, it's because we're doing things that we just that don't really feed us and give us energy. So like what feeds me, reading, preaching, writing, thinking, if I don't do enough of that, I can do a lot of that without getting burnt out. But then there are other tasks, administrative, pastoral care, things that take more from me than give back. Not that I have to do it all, right? I mean, it's part of my calling to do all of it. But if I get to a place where I'm doing more stuff that takes from me than gives to me, that's when burnout occurs, not just by me doing too much. Because I get this question a lot with the kind of the workload. I'm on pastoral staff at Grace. I lead DLI. I'm working my dissertation. I've got a young family. So it's like, well, man, aren't you going to burn out? Well, if I start doing if I have to do a lot of things I don't get energy from, and then yes, I will. But if I'm allowed to do what brings me life, then I'm good. So I think the other way that is not saying what can we take away from you. It's more like what you're doing, is it feeding you? Like, do you find joy in this? Because if you do, then we can get you away from burnout. But if you're doing a lot of stuff that you don't enjoy and that takes life from you, so that would be the first thing I would ask. It isn't, are you doing too much? It's, are you doing the right stuff?
Yeah, and as leaders, I think it's misunderstood many times that as leaders that our job is just to challenge people to go to the next level. Our job is for people to grow, and healthy things grow in rhythm. So like grass grows not just because of sunlight, but because of shade too. Gets too much sunlight, it scorches the earth. Gets too much water, it drowns it out. So like there's this idea that it's not just up and to the right. There is a rhythm that has to be found. So as leaders, we're not trying to just always move them forward. We're trying to help them grow for the long term, not just be a blazing, when Paul describes this race, he doesn't call it a sprint.
Right.
It's not given to the swift or the strong, but to he that endures. This is more your line of running, Landon. It's the long distance running thing that goes on that we're doing here. And so understanding that, I'm not just challenging somebody to work all the time. Now I've got to think about them for next week. I'm glad you want to serve every Sunday, but I need you to last longer than a year in this Christian walk. I need you to last longer than 10 years in this Christian walk. I need you to still be loving Jesus and grow in that. So I think you're exactly right in the regards of how do we move, how we're moving somebody. If they are only seeing their job as just a task, as I said earlier, and not a responsibility that they can take hold of and it becomes theirs, yeah, there's no significant, I feel I'm not needed. Anybody can do this job.
Right. And so we took it from that angle of someone who's been burnt out and we need to find a way to get them empowered, but not cozy. What are some practical ways that we get someone from maybe cozy or apathetic? We want to add the challenge. What are some loving ways that we can challenge others who might be apathetic or too cozy?
This is where your conflict question comes in right here. I go mining for conflict. If I've got relationship, which typically does, if they're high invitation already, then I go to them and say, "What's up, man? Like, why are we still here? What do you want?" And I ask those, what do you see? What do you want questions? Because it's all going to lead to the same answer. Oh, you want that? Well, that comes through this, and kind of moving them into that challenge role type thing. I think that understanding them, that one of the books that I referenced earlier, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of his principles in there is seek to understand before being understood. There's a lot of reasons why people enter cozy culture. So we need to understand why they're cozy before we start to diagnose a way to get them out of cozy, or give them a path to get out of cozy, I should say. And so I go in with questions first. Hey, what's up, man? Like, I notice you're here. Is this what you want to do? Is this what you want to be? Or we got a guy we're dealing with right now that he's kind of backing away. He's kind of moving into cozy culture. And he just asked one of our pastoral team to speak into his life, but he's starting to back off now. And it's like, oh, hang on. what's going on? You said this. And so this is where that conflict comes in, that challenge. Challenge is not necessarily in a task or a responsibility. Sometimes the challenge is just in a word. Bro, step it up. Let's go. You got this. You asked for this. So when we push, you said this, not me, that type of thing.
Yeah. It's so good. And it's a corollary point that I think bears mentioning for everyone who's watching this, to make sure you have a relationship with your pastors and with your leaders who can challenge you and can invite you, because there's so many voices in culture and so many people who don't know you, but still are trying to speak into your life through social media, through podcasts or through whatever, because I've dealt with situations before where someone's like, they're always at risk of burning out, but I don't even know what they're doing. So like, well, how are you going to burn out, by serving once a month? Like, how's that burning you out? Because they listen to voices of people saying, well, don't do too much. So it's really important for all of us, like, to maintain a relationship with a pastor, a mentor, a leader who can challenge us and invite us. And that's great. So how do we balance? This is a great question that came up, to balance ourselves between challenge and invitation. You mentioned you're a competitive go-getter, stay busy, fill your day, accomplish as much as you can. How do you balance that with the fact that, Jesus's simple invitation is for you, Marcus, to take my yoke upon you, for my burden is easy and my yoke is light, and come to me. So how do you deal with that? The invitation of Jesus, the challenge of Jesus in your own personal walk and identity?
Man, it's so funny how all of your questions at the beginning seem to fit into the context of what we're talking about right now. It really is. You are clearly a genius in this. I think that the balance, man, has to do with rhythm. I think you need a rhythm of challenge and invitation. Mondays for me are high invitation, because Sunday is high challenge. So like, Monday I do nothing. My wife and I, we send the kids to school and we sit on the couch together and drink coffee and may catch up on a TV show. This Monday we took a nap. I mean, like, it's those types of things. I think you've got to have those rhythms of that. And then I have different challenges. Sometimes a challenge over here is almost an invitation in comparison to a challenge over here. So not all challenges are the same. So like, I have a challenge and I coach two of my kids in soccer. Well, that's not the same preparation I do for a soccer practice as it is for a sermon on a Sunday or leading a staff meeting or anything like that. So it's almost like invitation. It's almost fun in those regards. There are days that working out is challenging, and there are days that working out is invitation. So not everything is always the same thing too. There are days that sermon prepping feels like invitation, and there are days that sermon prepping feels like the worst challenge ever. And so like, I think you got to understand
on Monday, if it's Monday or Tuesday, because you're taking off on Tuesday, if you're doing sermon prep, it's an invitation. It's great.
That's right.
Saturday, if you're doing sermon prep, it is it is challenge.
Well, just for the benefit of everybody listening, Thursday is my Saturday night at midnight. So right. My rule to self, you talk about a rule of life. I have one night outside of tonight, because I did this, which, by the way, because this took me out of rhythm being here late at the office tonight, I actually went and met with my family and had dinner with them before coming to here, because normally we do family night on Tuesday nights. So it kind of took that rhythm off, but I wanted to make sure we got that in, because Thursday night is I call it my drop dead night. No matter what, when I walk away Thursday night, Sunday is ready. And Thursday night is my false ending to my week, and allows me to be that I'm ready to go for that day. So.
Yeah, all that's helpful. And I found the same way that what's challenging for me and what's inviting for me is different than what's challenging for you or what's inviting for you.
That's right.
So
That's right.
one thing I had to learn is like, there are guys that are on staff at Grace that I know that like going to get coffee with someone like that's inviting for them. That breathes life. This is why I do what I do, to build relationships. And I don't hate it, but it's not inviting for me. It's a challenge for me. It's something that whenever I get done, I'm like, yeah, I need to go sit by myself for a little bit and kind of recollect my thoughts. So the challenge, so what we're saying though is it's not so much is it good or is it bad, but knowing, does this challenge me or does it invite me? I have to have that balance. So today, my normal rhythm is to go into office on Tuesdays and have meetings. I didn't have any meetings scheduled today. So I spent the entire day just me and my computer, writing, reading, working, preparing some stuff, doing some light administrative work. And like my invitation today has been super high. And it's been a fulfilling day. Where there are other people, if I told you had to sit behind a desk, like Mark, if I told you that today you sat behind a desk for 8 hours, did not meet with anyone, did not talk with anyone, that is not an inviting day for you. That's a challenge. We have to do both though, right? But that would not be an easy day. That'd be your hard day. For me, this is my easy day. Tomorrow, when it's full of meetings, that's my hard day. So it's learning to make sure, because that's where burnout happens. And this, someone really needs to get this, is burnout happens whenever you get sucked into doing things that are always challenging and you lose the ability to do what's inviting. So whenever you make a weekly schedule, you have to make sure you're scheduling in, okay, these are things that invite me into a richer relationship with Jesus. I experience him here. I feel him here. This gives me life. This gives me energy. And then balancing that out. And while we're on the same note, let's talk a little bit about, you use the word rhythm. So there's a good question about rhythm versus a set pattern, go with the flow. Like, how would you define living in rhythm? Does that mean you do the same thing every day? Does that mean, what does that mean to you?
So rhythm is intentional. So there is a set pattern to rhythm, but I don't know that it means the same things every single time. For example, I may work out on weekdays or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do the exact same workout every single time. I may do a different workout. So there's a set pattern or whatever. I think it's like this. For me, I know my my Sabbath is Monday. I know that. I do not schedule meetings on Mondays. It is a rare occurrence. There's about 3 or 4 times a year where I end up having to work on Monday. It typically has to do with the time of year, like if we're right around the Christmas moment and we're getting ready for some crazy experiences or something like that, or we've got a big event going on at the park. But Monday is our church's Sabbath for our staff. So that is a rhythm that is intentional. But you have all kinds of rhythms. You have annual rhythms that you have. You probably have a time. I knew at the beginning of this year that my staff cannot expect to see me for a couple of weeks in the month of July. I'm out. I already blocked that out. That's a rhythm that my wife and I have planned. We know that that's coming for us. That's the month that we discovered that the fewest people attend River Park. So if they don't want to be here, I don't want to be either. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to see it. And that type of thing. So I picked that rhythm based on a rhythm that I saw. So to answer your question, it's both. I need a rhythm that I intentionally planned, but I planned it based off of a reaction that I've seen that is rhythmically happening in our church over and over. So if you notice that every Friday you come into work with a bad attitude, that probably has something to do with what you're doing on Thursday. And I would say that means Thursday may be too challenging. Maybe you need to end the day with high invitation and your attitude probably changes on Friday. So that's what I've seen is like, if you would just read yourself, I know every year about November, I have some like little health things that seem to pop up every year in November until last year I discovered something. That's about when I stopped working out. About November, start eating unhealthily because of all the holiday stuff and stop working out as much because of all the holiday schedules and everything like that. And I started feeling bad. So last year I said, not this time. I'm going to keep my routines going and kind of break that thing. So you may recognize a pattern and then create a rhythm that counteracts a pattern or reinforces a pattern you want to keep happening from then on.
So great. Just to throw this out here, we got to wrap up soon. But so for me, like I'm fairly rigid with my morning routine, but I have a handful of things that I do that I schedule every week. Prayer, some kind of exercise, usually running, a date with my wife, family time, like intentional family time, Sabbath. I try to fast from something once a week. So those are my rhythms. Social time, like where I'm with friends, usually friends that don't go to my church, like just people that I have no, like there's no expectation of me, like just truly social time. So I've identified those. And so what the rhythm looks like is it doesn't look the same every week, but I know that's the rhythm of my life.
Yep.
So when I make my weekly calendar, I look and say, okay, have I planned Sabbath this week? Have I planned a day to fast something? Is there anything that's social on my calendar? And I have to put that on my calendar because we talked earlier, is like, as an introvert, I'll go months without doing anything social. Like, so if I want to be a rhythm, I have to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do this week. That's social. Here's what the date night that Sarah and I are going to go on, or so those are my rhythms, but it's not the same every week because life doesn't allow you to do that. Like some couples say every Friday night we go on a date. Well, that's not happens. For us, it's like having coffee outside on the back porch while the kids are, but there's just something there that makes
intentional
sure that it happens, know. Great. So let's ask a couple of quick questions because we need to wrap up for this. So a couple that we can answer quickly that take us back into because we've kind of focused on personal balance between challenge and invitation. So let's go back to leading a team. Is it always good for me to lead by getting down right next to the ones I'm leading? Because I always end up doing what I'm trying to lead others to do, which I think we've always been here. It's like there's this part of us is like, yeah, I'm just one of you. I'm in the trenches with you, but then it's kind of hard to lead always just in the trenches at some point. So how have you been able to challenge people without saying, I'm going to just do it with you, or I'm going to do it myself?
Yeah. So I think that one of the mistakes in church leadership now, whenever we go to conference and stuff like that, near these big leadership talks, is we fail to recognize. I feel like every leader should say the size of their church before they give the advice that they're about to give, because I think that it misleads so many people, because what works for that leader, and they say, you shouldn't be doing that because you got people that you pay to do that. It's like, no, I don't. Like, I sure don't. That's pretty much what I do. You know what I mean? Like, right. And so you can't take Stephen Furtick's weekly lifestyle of how he leads and apply it to your church size unless you're his church size. He wasn't there when he was your church size. He may have been developing in that direction. And I'm not saying you don't listen to what he's saying, because that will help you, but you need to understand the perspective that it's coming from. So to answer that question is, don't think that you can't be at that level. If you're at a stage, there's a season. You mentioned driving tractors earlier, dude. Yeah. I don't do that anymore. If I do it, it's because it's invitation, not because I have to. It's not because we've moved into that phase now. I've got people that are doing that sort of thing now and doing that for our team. We have a full-time facilities manager, and he has a full-time employee under him. So, I mean, like when I was doing the tractor stuff and Jeremy didn't want to do that sort of thing, we didn't have that. We were the facilities team. So getting down in the trench with them and trying to challenge them with you, that may be the season you're in. Come on, let's go, follow me, let's do this together. And then there may be another time where it's like, hey, you've got to do this. I need you to be here. I need this sort of thing done. It just comes with the season, but don't confuse the instructions of someone that's in a different place than you, that you're doing it wrong the way you're doing it just because they're at a different place. Understand where they're coming from.
Great. And here's another really practical question, and man, you just hit on this with what you said about going to church conferences and hearing, pastors of large churches telling you how to do it and the challenges that we don't always have that same context. How do we not get sucked into burnout whenever your church doesn't have enough volunteers to spread out responsibility?
Woo! Next session. Man, I think that, again, rhythm is so important. Look, man, most of church volunteer work happens on weekends. That means there's 5 other days that you need to be able to eject and kind of recluse from that a little bit. And so, like, if you're highly engaged, highly involved, first of all, we learned a while back that part of the reason volunteers don't sign up is because they think you've got it all together. Especially if you work in an excellence culture. Well, of course, everything we do is in excellence, but we're not doing everything we want to do. Well, volunteers don't know that. So they need to see that there is not just a need because you don't do it excellently. They need to be told. And most of the time we wait on that to be told from the stage. That's a bad strategy. That's like saying, I'm going to just say, anybody can do this. We need volunteers. Anybody, can you breathe? But like, if I can do it from a standpoint of specific to that person and say, hey, I would like for you to join our team. I saw you. I think you've got potential. Suddenly it goes back to what you said, Landon, a while ago, that you think you're giving them this responsibility, this raising of the bar, so to speak. It's not just like, anybody can do that, but you're asking them to be on that. And I think that allows you to recruit will keep you from being burnt out. Getting a good, healthy rhythm will keep you from being burnt out. And don't overstretch yourself. The Lord says he'll never put more on you than you can bear. But I find that we put a lot extra on ourselves. And so, like, don't confuse what God is calling you to do for what you think you should do.
Love that. One thing I would add is if you're in a position of leadership where you can help make some decisions, or at least have your pastor's ear to talk, that sometimes we do things that aren't necessary, that are burning people out. And so to examine what you're doing. So a great example for us was that like when we came back after being shut down for COVID, people hadn't been at church in almost 6 months. And then we try to get kids ministry going again, and kids ministry volunteers requires them to miss church. So it's like, hey, you haven't been at church, you haven't been to a live service in 6 months, but can you come back and commit to like not being in church? So at that point, it was like, we had to look at it's like, well, why are we doing this? Ideally, we believe it's best for kids to have their own service, for them to be, for them to have a whole experience designed just for them. But we had to settle for at least a little while into a rhythm of, okay, we're going to allow the kids and the teachers to come in for worship. And then we change what we did to accommodate the reality that we're in. Then once we built the team back up, got people healthy again, and, got past that little crisis, we went back to how it was. But in the moment we realized, hey, we're burning people out, and this isn't healthy. So let's adjust what we do for the sake of because the people don't exist for the church exists for the people, right? And that's
good.
Obviously the church exists for mission, but like as a pastor, my job isn't to get people to do what I want them to do. It's to love and help the people find their destiny and find their place. So what I would just add there is like, make sure that you might be there are sometimes where we're just doing things that are burning people out that have no real value, and there are other ways that we could do it. No. Awesome, man. Pastor Marcus, this has been fantastic. We could talk all night, and I hope the rest of you guys enjoyed this, took some notes, and picked up on all this wisdom. Anything before we go?
Man, I just, again, to everybody that's on, and you couldn't have picked a better thing to do. I love ministry. Been around it my whole life. Been serving in this type of thing my whole life, and I wouldn't say I've loved every minute of it. I won't say that, but I will say that I love the results of every minute of it, because the result is not only change in others' lives, but I've been changed more by doing ministry than any other thing in my life. It stretched me beyond anything else. So you're doing a great thing by being in ministry and serving your local church.
Awesome. Thanks, Pastor Marcus. Thank you, students, for logging on. We will see you next time. We have Pastor Alex Rivera from Lancaster, Pennsylvania with us next time, and he is great and hilarious, so you do not want to miss Pastor Alex. Thanks again, Marcus, and we'll see you guys on the next webinar. Good night, everyone.